Dylan, dude, welcome to the University of Life. Thank you. I need to ask straight away, what's the story with all the tattoos?
I've it's a good way to start. I always get so tongue tied at the start of these things, because I always want to say something good, something that has value, and I feel like there's so much stuff out there that you just listen to, and very little of it has value. Like so many podcasts you just listen to, and it's just content for the sake of content.
Mm.
Um, so first question, let's go. Tattoos. When I was little, I loved tattoos. I thought they were the coolest thing in the world. I remember one of my really good friends, probably my closest friend at the time there, I was like 18 years old. We both just watched Snatch, and I don't know if you've seen that movie, but Brad Pitt is just like covered in these cool tattoos, kind of like all over. And back then, this is 1999. I turned 18 in 98. Jeez, old. But yeah, he got a tattoo, like this big Virgin Mary on his ribs, and I thought that was cool. And I was like, I'm going to get tattoos. And I just started getting a couple, and then ended up getting a sleeve, and then just getting more and more. And then the tattoos I got, like, I know you don't have any tattoos, do you?
No, I'm a blank canvas. The reason actually I asked that is because it's very true to the first time I saw you, we were in a sauna together. I remember you were sitting in Lotus, and I looked over, but you had a sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually hadn't seen many people with tattoos. And it was really curious. But as I've kind of followed you and we've been connected, you go for these deep dives where you'll go for like 7 days or 8 days back to back of being tattooed. And there's huge pain in it as well. And so it's just quite an interesting journey that you put yourself through that obviously I have no connection with. I've never done it myself before. So it's just curious. Like there must be such huge meaning in it because you put yourself through a hell of a lot of pain.
One would think, right?
This is just fun shits and giggles.
Yeah. No, like I started getting tattoos. When I was young, I got tattoos of things that I liked, that I thought were cool, or I wanted things to have meaning. And I grew up religious, even though I'd love to talk about your new church experiences and stuff. But I grew up religious, and later became non-religious, I guess. Not like I have nothing against religion, but that actually was kind of a big part of my life. But I started getting tattoos kind of in that area where I was shifting out of it, but it was still something, and I still wanted things to have meaning. And so I was really into anime. And if you notice, I don't have any anime on me anymore, but I got an anime sleeve that was just really dumb. It had like two angels on it, and I don't know. I wanted things to have meaning with tattoos, and what I realized about tattoos as I got older is I just wanted them to be pretty.
Yeah.
And like as you move through life, the things that are important to you change. Even your aesthetics of what you find is beautiful change. But I don't know, now 40, 44, I've now covered up every tattoo that I've had except for one. I only have one tattoo now that is from the original that has meaning. And there's one on the back of my calf from a trip that I did with a bunch of my friends. So we went up to Canada, and there's this Haida Indian art up there, Native American, Native Canadian art, and it means brotherhood. It's just like it's like a sun made up of hands and faces, and all my friends have it, and my stepdad has it. We all have it in like different places, and so that's the only one that I kept. And all the rest of them, I wanted something that was more pretty and what I liked. And it's been more of like covering up my old identity. And I think the biggest one that I had was like there was this big atomic bomb that I got from after maybe 10 years after I got back, or no, less than 10 years. Let's see. When I said like, let's before this is like Jamie's like, is there anything you don't want to talk about? I'm like, let's not talk about it in my past. Let's not talk about like my time in the Marines or war or yoga or any of that. Let's just have fun. But I had this big atomic bomb on my back, and the fallen soldier memorial thing, which is like an M16 with a helmet on top for like my friends that I lost when I was in Iraq. And I carried that on my back, for 14 years. I got it when I was 30, and I just covered it up a month ago or so, 2 months ago. Is that how long it's been? Because
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
3 months.
yeah, something like that. But it is something that lost all meaning. And so I just wanted to kind of get rid of it because, like, who we associate ourselves with or whatever, who we think we are is generally or oftentimes who we were,
Yeah.
which is rarely ever who we are. And kind of getting rid of all of my old tattoos that had some sort of meaning to me, that had lost the meaning, really allowed me to kind of step into this new chapter of my life, which is one where I just want to feel beautiful in my body and like look at it and feel good rather than having to explain to somebody why I have a big atomic bomb on my back or
Yeah.
why I have an angel on my arm or a mermaid on my forearm or whatever, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's holding on to the scars and the weight of the past. It's look, I wanted to ask that question because I kind of think how we do one thing is how we do everything.
Is that
And
true though? I've heard that so many times. But how many, but like,
it,
I
it,
love these sayings. I love these sayings. Let's
it leaves
finish that, but I want to get back into
yeah,
it.
no, it leaves clues. Like you were you were somebody that I met. I think you had like 800,000 followers or something. But what struck me was you never posted on social media. You seldom posted on social media. But when you did, you posted with meaning. You were an influencer that didn't do any brand deals, or seldom did them,
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't overshare. It was this really interesting thing to observe. Oh, he posts about once a month. When he does, whoa, there's a lot of impact. That's interesting. He actually has care. And like your practice for anybody watching on, like if you go to Dylan's Instagram page and you look at just some of the stuff that he can do with his body, well, for me, as I've been trying to emulate, it's like 5 years and I'm not even scratching. There's huge practice, there's huge depth, there's huge meaning. And so when I asked that about that tattoos, yeah, what I didn't realize is, oh yeah, Dylan's in the studio for 6-7 days. 2 or 3 of those days are actually covering up. 2 or 3 of those days are clearing up the past and almost creating a bit of a blank canvas for him going forward. He's not allowing his past to define him. He's updating himself, and it's quite an interesting thing to say, clearing off those anchors and actually just say, no, do you know what? I want to be pretty in my body. And this artwork, what's the depth? What's the meaning? Oh, it's pretty. I just feel it's complementing my look. So yeah, that's what comes up for me, and that's why I kind of find it interesting.
Okay, then now let's get into something. How you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah, do you think it's true?
No, not even a little bit.
Okay, so this is the real reason why I've asked to chat with Dylan, because on other podcasts, that the conversation will flow. I actually once sat down for dinner with Dylan, a guy called Mike Chang, and Ian, and for the first 45 minutes, maybe an hour of the conversation, we were fighting over definitions. Somebody asked a question. I was like, well, what do you mean by that question? What do you mean by that adjective? Let's just make sure we're all going off the same the same grounding here and understanding. And my relationship with you is one of really interesting challenge. You were probably one of the first people to introduce me to like the fun that can be had in being like, yeah, it's a good saying. It sounds great and everything like that, but it's bullshit. So why don't you rip it apart first and foremost, and I will go from there.
No, I'd rather you defend it first. It's more fun that way because then we could look at where the holes are.
Yeah, it's also harder as well.
Harder to defend something that is to tear down?
Really, really hard. Well, it's harder to be the first one to speak. But for me, when I say how we do one thing is how we do everything. Of course, it's not how we do absolutely everything. But what happens is there is clues. There is kind of little similarities. So if, for example's sake, we have challenges when it comes to speaking our truth, being honest, well, that's going to show up not just with regards to perhaps a friendship, but it'll show up in relationship, it'll show up in family, it'll show up in probably communicating, in branding, it'll show up in several other areas. So how we do one thing in that one area reflects itself in all other areas and leaves clues to perhaps a deeper meaning. That's where I'm kind of grasping at.
I mean, I get it. There is some truth to it. Like if you are a motivated person and you pursue things like wholeheartedly, like one thing, you generally do that towards most things because that's your personality. But how you do one thing one day is not how you do something every day, right? In the same thing. So just like in that same regards, like, maybe you brush your teeth the same way, but how you approach work or how you approach a relationship or how you approach a friendship or something changes day to day. Life is dynamic. it's constantly moving through ebbs and flows, ups and downs, depending on how you feel, how you show up for that day. We don't show up our best every day. We don't show up our worst every day. That changes always. There's so many factors that influence how we do something that, sometimes you might be really motivated and you go out something really hard for a while and you put everything into it. And then other times, something might change. Like we both just lost one of our really close friends, and that changes things. And so you might do things really different for a while because you're honoring whatever that is or however that feels. And so how it's we show up differently for ourselves every day differently. We show up differently for people every day differently, and that's okay.
Yeah. So when we go back to the start about the tattoos,
Yeah. Okay. Back to that.
No, but it's like, again, analogy for life. It's, you actually went through a lot of pain to relieve yourself of that past imprint, that anchor to the past, and
Yeah.
give yourself.
So like there's a difference between, yeah, tattoos hurt, they're painful, it's a process, the healing sucks and all that, but it's temporary. It's not like there's pain and then there's like things hurt, right? Getting all these tattoos, they hurt. They weren't painful. You know what I mean? Again, this goes back to how do we define words, or like English. We're both native English speakers, even though I think most people can't understand you when you talk.
And I don't think I have an accent.
Yeah, not at all. For an Irishman, you're pretty benign. But yeah, so like we English is a really dynamic language, and so like pain and love have so many different contexts of usage. And so when you start talking about something like going through pain, and like why I just cut you off in the conversation short there is because you were using one definition of pain to then talk about a different definition of pain, which really should be two different words, right? So you're using physical pain, going through that, and you're talking about an emotional process.
Hurt.
And getting tattooed is a physical. If some people it might be emotional, for me it's not emotional. I go in there. I'm really good at dealing with physical pain. Years of breath work and meditation and everything, being able to disassociate my body from my being is one way to do it. Also to understand presence, like experience something in the moment that is temporary and understanding how it's not lasting, and the finiteness of it and how it's going to be over is really easy to cope with something like getting tattooed. Like, yeah, this hurts now, but it's not going to hurt forever, and it allows you to move through that process of being one that's purely physical versus what happened at the exact same time, literally the exact same time that I was getting tattooed is we lost our friend Aaron, right? That is another kind of pain that I'm still dealing with, that you're we're still like just talking about brings tears to my eyes because, miss him so much. It's, so to use this word in, two different completely contexts that it's like it's the same, doesn't do justice to what pain is. And so like, I would say the tattoos hurt at the time, but they weren't painful.
Yeah.
Like, again, it's just because language is limited, and to actually communicate, like how, the talk you have to understand the words that we're using to communicate with, and we all define things differently, so differently that oftentimes we have a conversation and we don't understand what the other person's saying because the foundation of the words that we're using to communicate are not the same.
And if we only probably took a little bit of time to do exactly as you're doing, and really inquire into the different definitions, the different layers at which we're communicating at, it may be a bit uncomfortable, but over time we would find a connection, a greater level of understanding, and probably a whole lot less dis-ease as a result.
Yeah, exactly.
And if we didn't shy away from perhaps the physical pain sometimes, our emotional or whatever, and just allowed ourselves to relieve ourselves of our past imprint, we'd probably feel a lot more freedom in the present.
Well, if you think that most people have a conversation to be heard,
Yeah.
rather than having a conversation to hear.
Yeah.
Being heard, you speak and you hope people understand what you're saying, but to hear, you need to understand what they're saying. And if unless you have a deep relationship or a real understanding of where they're coming from and how they define things and all that, it's really hard to hear somebody. And so generally, like, to have a real conversation, really to hear what they're saying, is you need to understand the meaning behind the words that they're using.
Yeah.
And like every word could be broken down to more simple words that are less
Precise.
yeah, or there are less definitions or fewer ways, fewer and less. Mess it up.
No,
There are fewer ways to hear what those things mean, and then there's these bigger words that have such an emotional tie to them and require history, your own personal history, to define them, versus like table, like if I say, oh, this, if I use just some nouns or whatever, it's really easy to talk about that and know that we're talking about the same thing. But as soon as I start talking about emotion or anything in the journey, right, it requires questions to hear.
For me, what comes up when I share that line, how we do one thing is how we do everything, is there's actually, let's say, a laziness in that.
Mm-hmm.
And your whole philosophy for life, there's not a laziness, there's a proactivity. And the proactivity, I think, allows for the freedom, it allows for the difference. It actually cuts us off from our patterns, and it has us living more present. And that's really, like, when I'm sitting in front of you here, it's like quite a strong example of presence. And, there's no rush in this. You're like, no, let's get this right. Let's get this right. Let's get this right. And I think there's different definitions for different people. There's different kind of labels for different types. I think if you take a lazy approach to life, you'll find pretty quickly that how when one person does one thing is symbolic of a whole load of other things in their life. But if you're pretty damn proactive with yourself, if you don't shy away from doing your work, you'll find that you get quite a lot of freedom in your life, and those patterns play out less and less. And in actual fact, somebody becomes all the more challenging and hard to read.
Yeah. Patterns is an easy thing to fall into, right? We people kind of like thrive on routine and patterns because it takes the effort out. Actually, even if you, that's another, like, to understand effort or doing one thing, or laziness. These, like, words that you brought up. Again, there's so much depth to that. I could go to the gym every day or work out or try learning or whatever and put so much effort into those activities, but because it's in a routine, a pattern that I do, there's actually very little effort into it, which is like if you're talking about wanting growth in life, the easiest way to have growth in whatever that area is to set up patterns, routines, so that you can kind of be lazy with it. Like momentum is a really hard thing to get going, but once it's going, it's really easy to continue. And so, like, if you're trying to better yourself in something, the hardest part is setting up the momentum, to putting in those patterns. It's not the effort that it takes once you're in that.
But interesting for me, the patterns will only get you so far, and after a certain point, they'll start to hold you back.
Yeah,
what I kind of hear, it's like when I'm chatting with you and I'm hearing your philosophy, it feels like almost an advanced philosophy. Can I ask you something a little bit more deeper?
Do you think there's such thing as advanced philosophy?
I definitely think that we look at the world through different lenses.
Yeah.
And we have our own realities. Now, advanced suggests superiority. Let's take that away. But integrating a difference that, yeah, I think different people look at the world differently. Mm-hmm. Different people live in different bubbles. And so much of what you were sharing is like, hey, if you're having a conversation with one person, you might be coming at it from different bubbles, in which case you're oftentimes talking probably about the same thing, but you're just miscommunicating and misunderstanding. And if instead of doing that, where we're talking at each other, we try to find the base levels and we try to find a level of understanding, we're going to have a far better conversation eventually. Might be a little bit slower in the initial sense, but over time it'll progress a hell of a lot more efficiently.
Yeah.
I'm curious the timing. You said 3 months ago that you got that tattoo, the atomic bomb, and the
No, when I was 29, right
Oh.
before I turned 30, I got the atomic bomb tattoo.
oh, but got it removed about 3 months ago
I got it covered up. Yeah.
at the
I
exact same time that we lost our friend Aaron.
Yeah.
What's the correlation,
with that?
or is there a correlation?
Yeah, the correlation was Aaron owns a tattoo studio, and and I'm partly covered up because of him, because he's the friend hookup, right? So I don't, Aaron, he was what listeners we're talking about. It's actually interesting because Jamie and I met Aaron on the same day, and we became friends with him. I became a really close friend with him, and he used to stay at my house every week, just because in Bali there's different towns. There's like Canggu, Uluwatu, Ubud, and they're like an hour, 2 hours away from each other. And I live in Canggu, which is kind of a bit where we are right now. It's a bit more central. And Aaron was kind of always back and forth between Ubud and Uluwatu, but most of his business and work was in Canggu. So he would come and stay at my house at least once a week. And that actually all stopped when he met his girlfriend less than a year ago, or I think they're coming right up on like what would have been a year. But because that relationship was really good for him, he stopped staying over so much. And so there was like a bit of time that I didn't get to hang out with him as much as I was used to hanging out with him every single week.
Mm.
He's really one of my closest friends here. And then when I started getting into tattoos, I was up in Ubud every single day getting tattooed and hanging out with him or staying at his house or whatever. And the day before he died, I was getting tattooed at his studio, and he came in and said that he was going to Thailand or whatever, which is where he passed away. Yeah, he's like that was like my last goodbye. So there's not really any correlation between me getting covered up. I was already doing it. Is the whole reason why it happened when it happened is because I was waiting for this artist, this Brazilian artist that I wanted to do my tattoos, and I've been waiting for him for like 2 years to come. Aaron brought him to his studio, and then he was tattooing me there. And that was like a 2-month process.
What do you learn about grief? Like 3 months on, going through a process like that where you lose a best friend.
I have probably a better understanding with death and loss than most people, I think. Part of it from my time in the Marine Corps, I lost, 18 years old. If I go back, like a lot of my family members had passed when I was in high school. My uncle died of a drug overdose when I was 16 years old. My grandmother shortly after that. My grandfather, my dad's dad, he died when I was like 10. And so like loss of family members and stuff. My dad's other uncle died when I was 24. But then in the Marine Corps, when I was in Iraq, I had lost a couple friends, some through suicide from results of after the war, and then,
Wow.
some from the war. And then I became a firefighter paramedic. And I was a paramedic first for 8 years. And so that was like daily living with like people literally dying in your hands. I think there was a run of like 6 months where I think on my shift I had somebody die, and usually from like a heart attack or something like that. It's pretty common. You're running 20 calls a day or so. There's you're going to see that a lot, and so there starts to become a disconnection with it a little bit, and also more of a connection with life, because you start to really understand the fragility of life. And then about 4 years ago, I lost my dad to cancer. And, losing a parent is something completely different, because it's like when you plan your life and you think about all the things that you're going to do. And, I recently got married. We're coming up on our 1-year anniversary next month. But, my dad never got to meet my wife. He's never going to be a grandfather and stuff. And so it's like those kinds of experiences you miss out. And so the grief starts to come, grief is about you, obviously. Death, like the loss of a friend, is always a selfish thing, right? Because after you die, it's, Aaron's not, well, I don't believe in an afterlife, which is actually comforting because eternity, that's a scary thing. That's more scary than anything else, whether it's, golden roads and angels and harps and whatever. For eternity, I'm 44 and I get bored. I need like 3 different devices sometimes to keep my attention, right? Could you imagine an eternity of that? That sounds crazy.
That actually used to keep me up late at night when I was younger. The thought of like, oh my God, I'm going to be here for infinity.
Right.
That haunted me so much. I couldn't sleep. I found myself just in these very weird states, sitting in that idea of life is endless.
I think one of the reasons why so many rock stars and like celebrities and stuff commit suicide is because they get to a point where they're no longer growing. And growth is essential for happiness. It's one of the most essential things to feel content, to feel like your life has purpose or meaning, is to be moving towards something. And in eternity, like, when are you going to run out? Did you ever see that? What was it, the Good Life, or was it The Good Place or something? The Good Place? I don't know. There's this show with I think Kristen Bell or whatever. Like, they basically is like an afterlife show, and not going to spoil it. So maybe I will spoil it. Fuck it. But like in the end, like they're in this afterlife, and basically what they choose after a certain amount of time is to basically walk into the nothingness and cease to exist. And that's like, if I can't think of a better heaven than that. And if you look at so many philosophy, look at like Hinduism, Buddhism and stuff, it's about escaping karma. It's about escaping rebirth and reincarnation, to go back to lose ego. So whether there's an afterlife or not, like, what we want in the afterlife is no longer to have an identity of who we are, so that there's no longer a tie to karma, or no longer a need to grow, right? We just can simply cease to exist, to get out of the rat race. So for like Aaron, passing on, like, he's either doesn't exist with my father, not existing, like he exists only in our memory, only in our hearts, right? And so it's really about us. When we lose somebody, it's not about them. It's always about us. I had a teacher, philosophical teacher. She told me the difference between love and attachment is love is wanting happiness for somebody, and attachment is what the happiness that person gives you. And when suffering comes from loss of attachment, or like a separation, right? So when we have that separation, we are no longer getting fulfilled by that person, and that's where the suffering comes from. It's only when you let go of that you're able to love. Like, wherever Aaron is or isn't right now is where we're all going to be soon.
I had to ask into that space because grief, I have found extraordinarily challenging to process. And the most frustrating thing for me is that there's no fantastic authorities in it. You can look at it is interesting that what you shared, that like, hey, we all experience grief, and we're all going to die at some stage, but it's like this big space that we don't really focus too much in on. And even when it comes to, so many people's funerals and stuff, they're quite rushed. It's like someone dies and there's a rush to process that and then move it on. Mm-hmm. And actually for me, some of the saddest things is just how quickly things move on.
Well, life is for the living, and I actually agree it should move on. It needs to, because life is only for the living. If we spend our time with something like, like grieving over what we lost, it's a choice. As being human, it's a necessary choice. We need to process things, and the better that you, I guess, the more intellectual understanding you have at something, the better you could process it emotionally, because you could intellectually see the process happening and you could add reason to it. It doesn't mean that when you lose somebody, that there was a reason why that person happened. I hate the everything happens for a reason kind of thing, or trust in the universe or whatever. Life is nothing but chaos. Like the the laws of nature is entropy, moving from organization to disorganization. That is what's happening with everything. Things become more and more chaotic as they progress. And the more that you try to find reason in that chaos, the more lost that you're going to become.
Sorry, one second. Let me rewind that. So everything kind of starts off in an organized fashion, or
Right.
like there's plentiful resources and everything. But as everything progresses, well, there's a day of fatigue. There's a use of resources. There's less resources. So every day it becomes a little bit more challenging to have that same peace that you had the day before, that same abundance that you had the day before. And so as a kind of a trajectory going forward there's this impending and almost compounding disorientation and impending chaos.
Yeah, yes, and no.
Okay.
Because the what stops entropy is energy. Because entropy is basically energy dispersing, right? As you know, if you look at the sun's not going to last forever, because it's expressing its energy out into the universe, and eventually that's going to go away. But we're able to take that energy and use it to find organization, to move against chaos. So to move against that, it takes effort. Things don't happen without effort. And what I hear, especially like in the spiritual world that I live in, is that, listen to the universe, go with the flow of the universe. Well, if you do that, the universe is going into chaos. It's expanding. It's not moving towards organization. It's not moving in the direction that you want to live your life. It's going the exact opposite. What you have to do is put your own energy into whatever you're doing to move towards what you want. You give your life reason. You give your life meaning. You give your life purpose. You put the energy into what you want. And without that, your life goes into chaos, because that is the will of the universe.
Okay, so bear with me. Give me that word that alludes to the idea of this like ever developing and compounding chaos.
Entropy.
Entropy. Okay, so I always had this idea that yes, life is all the time getting more challenging, more stressful.
That's a physics word, by the way. It's not a philosophical word, but I'm choosing to use a physics-based term in a philosophical way.
The choice. What anybody listening on could recognize is that when you chat with Dylan, he'll chat with you from a number of different layers and intellects, and so it's actually quite a lovely journey, because very few people socially will challenge. We like to get along, but there's people pleasing on so many layers, and you just don't sit in that space. You will call somebody up on their bullshit, and you will speak into the regular, awkward, challenging points, and it's so refreshing. But
thank you. I and you actually nailed the reason why, and it's because it's people pleasing. I don't know.
Well, I see this as your love.
Yeah, well, if you love somebody, you want to be honest with them. You want to be truthful with them. You don't want to please them.
For you. So my struggle was that for people that I loved, I wanted a champion. I wanted a compliment. I wanted a lift up. And that's nice.
Do you think it's for them, or do you think it's for you?
It's a bit of both. I felt I had.
But what's the root? Are you trying to please other people to please them, or are you trying to please other people to please yourself?
Okay.
And I don't really like that word please so much.
So I really want to put a past tense on this, because this is definitely an area that I've really kind of had to zone in on. And one of the lovely things that I found is that helping somebody see a brighter path for themselves, or see things from a more positively serving way for themselves, I could see the relief and the joy that it brings to them. And that brought me a lot of joy. But what I recognize now is that has its merits, but also what you're doing has its huge merits too, of holding up a mirror and sometimes telling something that they don't want to hear. That can actually be oftentimes the greatest gift that you can give somebody, because for every like heartwarming positive compliment that you get, it's probably a 10-to-1 ratio, or maybe even 100-to-1 ratio, in terms of somebody will say a challenging reflection or a bit of feedback from a place of love. You get lots of challenge from criticism and shit energy, but there's a very, very select few that will meet you with challenging love. And that's a very, I would say, unique characteristic in you. And like, I kind of find, like when
I don't think there's anything unique about me. But
of course you don't.
wait, yeah.
Well, I find, certainly for me, when I analyze the friendships in my life and the people in my life, I recognize that all of them have quite an inspiring effect. That's yours. You show up, and generally speaking, every conversation there's something. I go, oh, that's great, and it's permission for me to do it going forward too.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I think we are very lucky in our lives with I'm getting ready to leave Bali. Like I feel I need to, for a lot of different reasons. Not anytime really soon or permanent, but one of the things that really keeps me here is the community of friends that we have. I think that's what keeps anybody anywhere. I think about all the places that I lived before that were just awful places to be, that like no one would choose that to live there, but you live there for the community.
Yeah, but like I go back, like your notes on grief are like, here, look, life is for the living, and like life needs to move on and everything like that. But when the real anchoring thing to life is the community and the people you surround yourself with most, it's so disorientating when a key figure and a high impacting, inspiring person in your life goes.
Yeah.
And to come to terms with that, like, I'm curious. I'd actually love to ask, like, what would be your philosophy or your tool to, like, hey, look, this helps in grief.
It's a really good question, and a really hard one to answer, because grief is a personal thing, and grieving has to do with your with experience. You get better, right? And
isn't that such a harsh answer, though?
It is a harsh answer, and why I'm good with grieving is because I've had so much experience with it, and it's not being better at grieving. The process to be better at it is not one that you want to go through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So sometimes, like, if you haven't been through a lot of grief, it's okay to grieve for a while, but then there's the other part of it. Like, I was lucky enough to deal with it from a very young, early age where it didn't trap me, you know, or at least I have the personality that, I think when I was really little, I struggled a lot with depression and had suicidal thoughts all the time, and I was really unhappy. I remember my mother told me one time that, you know, like, you're always going to have problems, but the problems you have today are not going to be the problems you have tomorrow.
So my idea of life, or my recognition of life, is that my problems actually get more challenging. My stresses get more. The hurt down the line gets more and more, heavier and heavier. And yeah, the challenges that are going to show up in life.
Why do you think that is?
I actually, the very philosophy that we talked about, that life is challenging you. Life, like, the more grounded you are, the more confident you are, the greater you can lean out of your comfort zone.
Can I ask you another question, though, before you finish
Please
that?
do, yeah.
Is challenge good or bad?
So,
I mean, it's obviously both, but
so there's two sides to it, and kind of what I feel is that we have a responsibility. Like, you talked about harnessing energy, and for me, there's harnessing energy through work and through discipline.
creating energy.
Well, actually, harnessing and creating.
Well, where you harness it from?
Well, you were giving the example of the sun and nature and flow.
Well, that's just because that's from a physics side. All the energy that we have, the sun comes down, feeds the plants, animals eat the plants, we eat the animals, and now we have energy. So that's how we harness it. But when we want to put the energy forward, I mean, it comes from our food. But emotionally, maybe it comes from our friends and our support groups and stuff.
So we nurture.
But that energy is such a
big subject.
Distorted, misunderstood, overused, manipulated garbage of a word now in today's society. I think, like, how we completely don't understand this word energy, and we use it for everything, and we explain stuff with energy, and we don't know what it means.
Okay, quickly give me your definition.
Energy is the ability to do work.
Okay.
Boom, physics, thank you.
Okay. So my belief is that in a world that is ever evolving in terms of stress and challenge and dis-ease, we can choose to do one of two things. Try and hold the line, but unfortunately at a certain point life is going to engulf us and overrun, or build ourselves up all the more and perhaps outperform that growth curve, in which case life gets easier. And so
Outperform the growth curve. Break that down for me.
So there is a growth trajectory of challenge, stress, disease in our life. Right?
Okay. Yeah, continue on.
Okay. And if we stay put, that grows and grows and grows to the point that it overwhelms and engulfs. Or if we outperform that in terms of building up our strength, our capacity, our energy, then we can deal with this more easily. In which case, we outperform the growth curve and life doesn't get harder anymore, it gets easier.
Can you grow without stress?
I would say stress is a necessary component of growth.
Of course. You don't go on vacation, you lay by the beach and drink Mai Tais all day, and then afterwards you go, fuck, I grew so much as a person.
No.
You know, it's after you go
But you
through a
might
breakup.
physically grow as well.
You might make physically, but like emotional growth. We grow through stress. There's two types of stress: eustress and distress.
Yeah.
Right? Eustress is the stress that we're able to handle and better ourselves from. Distress is it's too much for us to handle and it breaks us down. And so to grow as a person, and remember, growth is necessary for life, for happiness, for fulfillment. And so for that to happen, there has to be a certain amount of stress. The majority of that stress that you put into your life, you want to put it into yourself, because that's where you have the most control of the amount of stress needed for growth, whether that's, physical to working out or emotional through learning and listening and dealing. It's the stress that you don't have control over that breaks you down, the loss of friends and family or relationships or jobs or, that's the kind of stuff. But they all, regardless of whether you create it or if it's created for you, you have the choice to a certain capacity to grow from it or to break it down. And a lot of that is like your history and how you show up for yourself in those moments, how you choose. I think, for you look at, like Nelson Mandela or Gandhi or these other people that have just been through some of the most inspirational philosophical people, Mother Teresa, that have done the most, have lived some of the hardest lives ever, and also have spread the most joy and happiness and impact on the world. And so it's not a matter of how hard the stress is, it's a matter of how you show up for that stress and how you use that stress to grow.
I had this journey with this body worker who was poking and prodding my body in all sorts of different ways and inflicting some serious amounts of pain on me. And he kind of giggled as I was screaming, and he was like, "Jamie, no pain, no gain." And he said, "Please sit with this and learn to work through this, because the more stress that you can manage in your life, the more success you can invite in." I liked it.
Yeah, you could definitely, again, that word pain, right? You could have a lot of gain without pain. And when it comes to growth through the body, pain is the distress that you don't want to feel. There's this is where like having an understanding, like your own definitions of words of like pain and discomfort. The way that like physical growth, I like to look at being a yoga teacher and stuff, is like, if you put yourself into discomfort, how you know it's good for you is when you move out of that discomfort stops. All right. If it's still there and it persists, then it's probably too much. And again, going through distress and eustress.
So, sorry, I like, my curiosity is now getting the better of me, because you're one of the first people I saw to do, like, go up into a handstand without any obvious push or anything. It's like you floated up into a handstand and you floated down into a press up, but your feet didn't touch the ground. And then you went right back up into a handstand. And then you went down into a press up where your feet did touch the ground. And like, to me, that is the most incredible like way of working a body. It demonstrates enormous strength. And
Well, I'm 5'7", you're 6'5". It's a lot easier for me to do it than for you to do it.
but uh, like that, like that gives a serious amount of prominence for me to be like, wait, what is actually the secret to the training that you're doing? And what I'm hearing there is that, like, Jamie, know your stress, know your stress capacity, work with it. Do not inflict over unnecessary pain on your body. Don't take on unnecessary stress in your life. Recognize that most of the stress you'll have in your life is self-induced. You only have a certain capacity of it. If you overdo it, you will set yourself up on a disadvantage. Manage yourself accordingly. And so I'm kind of figuring, like, do you work through that, like, to get to that initially? Was that years of work, or is there kind of a secret? And the kind of secret that I'm pulling from that is, it's don't go beyond.
If you do too much of anything, it sets you back instead of pushing you forward. Okay. And so, like, if you're looking to grow, like, physically, you don't want to work through pain so much, right? Like,
which is so counter narrative to, like, the masculine training of, like, work through the pain, bash through the pain.
No, it doesn't. So you have I'm trying to think of the word. So, like, you're basically your remodeling model. So how the body repairs itself and builds itself. You could also say this works emotionally as well, but for strength is different than flexibility.
You know, when you said you could also say this emotionally, I was just about to say, well, how we do one thing is how we do everything.
No, well, how I approach strength training is not how I approach flexibility, because they're different models. And how I approach things emotionally is also not how I'd approach it physically.
But there are clues.
But that you could say there's a different model for that. There's a remodeling model, right?
Let me bring you back. Yes.
Okay, so if you work out, you move into degradation, where you degrade the body, you break it down, and then the body needs to recover. So you have a net degradation and you have a net synthesis. The moment that you apply stress to the body, it breaks down, and then it's going to start healing itself. At the same moment that you're like, do a workout or whatever, the body starts healing. Well, in the first part of that, degradation is more than synthesis, and so you're at a negative loss. But after for creating hypertrophy, for building muscle, it's going to be 2 to 3 days. Roughly about 48 to 72 hours. Then you're going to move into your net synthesis, meaning that you got the most growth that you're going to get from the stress that you put on your body. At that point, you want to do it again. And so you're building small increments. But if I go and there's a little fly just. Okay. If I, let's say if I do, if I do chest day, right, and I do a really hard chest day, and then the next day I do chest day, that's going to keep me in degradation, and I'm just going to continue to break myself down until I break myself and I can't, and I need to rest because I don't have a choice.
I learned this from our friend Ian. So myself and Dylan were really lucky to kind of go through this period of a gym where there's just this really tight community of these incredible athletes all kind of training, and you'd go in, you'd do your training, you'd learn from somebody else's, and God, the conversations that flowed from there were amazing. But I remember I hit a real plateau in training, and Ian was like, you're overtraining. And he kind of was like, why don't we train together for a couple of months, and what we're going to do is, Jamie, instead of training every day, we're going to train every other day. And it was incredible because I had plateaued. But after 2 or 3 weeks of training every other day, taking breaks in between, my results went through the roof. My form went through the roof. But in actual fact, the other interesting thing was my business went through the roof. And socializing became much more calm because of the extra time and the extra energy that I had that to put into my relationships and put into my work. I thought it was so interesting. He was like, Jamie, train together with me. It'll cost X amount, but it'll pay itself back several fold. And it did. And I find that probably, like, an unfortunate thing is we get so much endorphins from working out that some of us get a bit addicted to it, and we don't recognize that. We think we're relieving stress when in actual fact we're doubly loading our bodies up, or we're unnecessarily loading our bodies up. And it's funny, it takes discipline to train, but it also takes a lot of discipline to know when not to train.
Well, if you remember, like, you grow in rest. That's your body needs time to recover. I mean, that's with everything, and that's, I guess we go back to the grieving process, like to get through it. It's like you need to like rest.
Take time. Yeah. That's actually an interesting one, because on one side there's the idea that life is for the living, and so things move fast.
Life is for the living. It's not for the dead, obviously.
No, but
like I would love to make you to make that argument that life is not for the living in any capacity.
No, but I don't even want to go there. I see the most challenging thing, generally speaking, when you're interviewing somebody, you have like 6 or 7 subjects all that you're playing at. And it's such a funny tactic. So Dylan obviously gets off on disrupting conversations and
am I a disruptor?
Highlighting his intellect. So yes, it's so disorientating.
I just always want to break it down to the truth. I think if something is true, that it's obvious, that there's not an argument against it. Like when you get down to like bare bones truth, you have to go like, yeah, that's what it is. And if it's not that, then you just continue working through the conversation. And every time when you're going through that conversation with somebody, you get to the point where there's that argument, like you need to stop there because we're trying to get to truth. We're not trying to explore what's not true. We're trying to get to bare bones where you and I are both like, yes, exactly.
It's uncomfortable though, so we resist it.
Are you? I'm not uncomfortable.
No.
And I'm partly because you're just such a cuddly guy. You know?
But that's your norm. I do find, initially speaking, it took me a little while to understand your uniqueness, also your love. And
I'm abrasive.
But, you know, if we go back to that idea of grieving, like so much of the grieving process is get on with it. But actually, I think what you shared there is really true. That, like, you know, if you do want to recover, you do need to rest. And so as much as the world may be moving on, you do need to take your time to yourself. And oftentimes probably what prolongs the grieving process for a lot of people is that life moves on and it sweeps them up and doesn't allow time and necessary space to really sit with what's coming up. And
I think what helps me a lot is focusing, whenever you lose somebody, focusing on the love that was there and all the good things and stuff, rather than focusing on what's not there anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wish all you guys could have known our friend Aaron. He was just one of a kind human and really good at connecting. He connected people. I mean, our group pretty much is the group that it is because of him. I mean, except for you and I, because you and I were friends before that. But so many of the other people, I don't know if I would have these strong connections with them without him. And so I'm eternally grateful. And I, by nature, am a more reclusive person. Like, I love being around people. I love hanging out and stuff, but I'm the kind of person that you need to invite me or come to me or something. Like, I'll just stay at home by myself or with my wife, you know, and just be content. But, you know, Aaron was the kind of person that was always making things happen and bringing the community together and planning events and planning outings, and which is an important thing when you as you get older and, you know, farther away from like university and stuff, and your friends groups get smaller, is to maintain a community outside of gym or church or whatever your community is, you know.
Yeah, it is fascinating the way different people show up socially. There are some that have, let's say, the comfort in isolation, and then there's the others that have the comfort in community. And to have like a blend, a mix of everything is so important in a social circle. And to get the benefit of having somebody who is like a hyper social community and playful type is something that, you kind of pinch yourself and you say you're very lucky.
Yeah.
That's actually what happened for me when I heard that he passed. immediately speaking, I was like, I'm so lucky I got to have time with them.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky I got to experience him. I immediately speaking actually went to your wedding where he had a sense of humor that was so beautifully edgy and uncomfortable. And so, you know, those types that they almost, they say a speech and kind of you're listening on and you're like, is he actually saying that? And like, no, he can't be saying that. Is he serious? He's not serious. And he brings you just to the point that you've gone, oh my God, he's actually serious. And he goes, just fucking with you guys. And
Yeah.
it's so good. So
Aaron's the kind of guy that will come up behind you and stick his finger in your butt just to watch you squirm, you know, like, yeah. What I do love, like, you know, we've had a few hangouts since he's passed and stuff, but you know, like bringing up his memory, you know, I think dealing with grief is a lot of it is not to shy away. Again, it's like to focus in on that love part, and the more that you can do that, the more it helps to process.
yeah.
You know, rather than trying to ignore it or pretend like it's not there, but to like celebrate all the qualities.
It's a funny thing. Like, look, my experience of grief really isn't as much in death. It's more so in breakups. But like, I think it's
That's worse, almost, because like in breakups, there's still like a possibility. Like, wait, why did this happen? You know, like there you could argue it. You could try to be like, well, you know, maybe or whatever. Like,
yeah.
it depends on what side of the breakup you are on too.
But like that idea of like people just, let's say, let's just delete the past. Let's just delete the memories. And, you know, you see it like well, actually, my kind of idea of it is in movies and stuff where, you know, somebody's like, don't mention your father that's passed away, or don't mention the friend that's passed away. And it's like, well,
also, like, don't like, yeah, but it's more true. Like, don't mention the ex, right?
no,
like,
no. But yeah, it plays up all the more in that regard. But it's like, is that really allowing for the good processing of something?
and who cares? Everybody has a like as far as like exes and stuff. Magda, today or yesterday, she brought up her ex, or actually maybe today and yesterday, she mentioned her ex's name, which is fine, you know. Like, everybody has an ex, everybody has a past.
One thing that I notice is, generally speaking, the less access somebody has to their past, and the less open people are to go into their past, the more challenged, the more dis-ease I kind of feel. Whereas the ease at which someone will go to the past, the ease at which somebody will remember somebody, and immediately speaking, let's say, go to the fond points, the more I kind of feel at peace, the more I kind of feel healed, the more I feel kind of positive and niceness in that energy.
When I think back to the majority of my exes, I have like really almost nothing but positive memories with all of them. Like, there's obviously reasons why they're exes, but there's more reasons why we were together in that period of time. And so,
yeah, the funny thing that's coming up for me as you share that is that, like, there's an accumulation of all the reasons why perhaps you should break up at that point of breakup, and that's kind of like the last memory or moment. But exactly as you shared, there's all the other reasons why you guys got together and why you guys had your time together. And I feel it's a very, very important thing for, let's say, a grieving process to come to the point where you can't actually even remember those negative points, or perhaps you can, but they're overshadowed by all the good. Because, like what they say, there's no greater teacher than relationship. And whether that's with somebody in your life that's passed, or with somebody in your life that you've moved on from, the fact of the matter is that if they spent any time in your life, and whether it was positive or there was negatives, they're going to have taught you a hell of a lot, and that will stand to you forevermore going forward from there. So it's a sad thing if you can't see that, appreciate that, and find gratitude, I would feel. This is the point where I sit and I'm like, okay, where's the question coming in, or where's the side point? But that seems like that was the first point that you're like, yeah, actually, I agree with that.
I do agree with that.
That feels really nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, see, we get to bedrock. You get to truth, and the hard part with like a podcast like this is once you get to the truth, then you're like, okay, well, now what? Now we got to talk about something else because we got there.
Oh, I actually think that whole process in itself is actually really, really cool. That, like, there's a lot of bullshit that I entertained in my life for so long. And I recognize that a lot of that bullshit came from, let's say, that people pleasing. It came from misunderstanding actually a lot of the time, and not even addressing those misunderstandings. And what I kind of feel that there's a piece, like you talked about, like, oh yeah, Jamie, I just sit at home with my wife, I'm happy, play video games, watch TV, play with my dog. You actually have a lot of peace in your life. And I feel a lot of the peace is because you don't harbor any issues, or you don't harbor, bite your tongue. If you feel something, you say it, you express it. If somebody's like saying something that you don't agree in the moment, you say it. My gut instinct tells me that when you go at home and lie on the couch, you lie on the couch. You do not think about all the things that you should have said or should have done. You have that peace.
Yeah, that's 100% correct.
And that's unique. I think there's very, very few people that can say, hey, when I go home at the end of the day, I've said all I needed to say. I've expressed myself, so now I can sit in peace. I, like, for years would journal in the evenings, journal in the mornings, and, like, analyze my days and be like, I wish I did that a little bit better. I wish I did this a little bit better. I am now starting to experience some of the peace at which you're talking about. But I never would have thought, Jamie, you know that peace that you're looking for? It's on the other side of the conflicts that you're avoiding. It's on the other side of those awkward conversations that you're not having. But it actually makes so much sense when it's illustrated, and it's interesting to see a practical example play out over the course of the podcast.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's interesting, like my wife and I are so completely different in how we go about things. Like I feel like I am more of an abrasive person, not just because I want to sand it down until it's polished, right? Like that's what I like. And where my wife, I'm not an emotional person. Well, I am emotional, but I'm not like outwardly emotional. I have very thick skin. I don't take hardly anything personal ever. I rarely ever think something is about me. You know, whenever I'm talking to somebody, I immediately recognize that whatever they're talking about is about them, unless it is about me.
So that is so unique. And I know you're in your flow of conversation, but I just want to say that's one of the ones that I struggled with so much. I thought so much was about me. I'd like, somebody would be out of sorts. What did I do? It's like, no, Jamie, they're just out of sorts. Somebody had something to say about something I said. It's like, no, Jamie, so much of this is not personal. It's on their side. Give yourself that peace. I think that's discipline and hard work to get to that point of peace that you've achieved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know what it is. Yesterday, I think I made my wife Magda, I think I made her cry yesterday. And I was trying to do something on my phone, and she's the kind of person, she's the most sensitive, by the most emotionally connected person, and soft and loving, like all the reasons why I love her. And we haven't had a single fight since we've been married, not one.
Until yesterday?
No, it wasn't a fight. No, I think I was doing something on my phone, and she just was laying on me, right? And just like in front of me, because she's building her website right now, and just like kind of like interrupted. And I was like, babe, come on, like give me some space, like that. And that's it. Like I'm like, you're like, I need some space. But I was in that tone, but very much like, get off me, I need space, because that's how I am. When I feel something, I say it. I'm like, I don't mean it in anything harsh or anything like that. And she knows that, but she's still who she is. And I know who she is, she knows who she is, and she knows who I am. But so she cried. And she just like, I didn't see her crying because I'm laying on the couch, right? And so she gets up like this and just like kind of turns her back a little bit on me. And immediately I know I hurt her feelings, right? Because I was too abrupt, because, and I've said, I'm sorry, like I didn't mean to snap at you like that, but I was doing something and I need my space. I love you. And she's like, I know. And that's it. That is as far as anything ever goes between us, is like, I react in a way that is abrasive because that's who I am. And she reacts in a way that is emotional, and that's because that's who she is. And I recognize who we both are. Not that I did anything wrong, because I don't feel like I did anything wrong. I'm not sorry because I told her to get off me or that I needed my space. She like put herself like in there, just it's like anything. I'll be watching TV and she'll just like put her head right in front of my face and like without, which is fine. And I'm like, okay, well, you're more important to me than the TV. So I'll just hold on a second. Let me pause whatever and give you my full attention. When we're watching a show, I generally have to stop the show like 10, 15 times, pause it, and give her my full attention because I don't want to divide my attention between her and something else. I want to give her everything that she deserves. But I recognize who we are as people, and I recognize who I am quickly, and I understand that her reaction is not because of me, it's because of who she is. And I don't know, it's...
No, I'm also getting the fact that you recognize, hey, look, you're abrasive. And that's you. And you aren't going to dramatically try and change that part of you because in actual fact you like you. And she's emotional and that's fine. And it's fine you two being each other. And like I kind of hear so often that like relationship is about compromise. And it's like, well, or you can just be who you are and learn to navigate around that. And what I kind of get is that you're owning you, she's owning herself. You're not putting the weight of responsibility of yourselves on each other. You're just learning how to get on while still be true to yourselves.
There's so much truth in that relationship about compromise and relationships not about compromise, but it's always without like a deeper understanding. You should never compromise who you are for someone else because that's who you are. You should always be growing to be a better version of yourself, but that should always be for yourself, not for somebody else.
You know what bites really hard when you say that? Because I recognize, like, if someone was like, Jamie, what's the lesson that you've learned recently that you can see has brought the biggest negative impact in your life? And it's that I would love others ahead of myself. And so I would prioritize others ahead of myself. And I would deprioritize myself as a result. And that obviously over time starts to really knock your self-worth. It also puts your emotional and physical stability dependent on others. And
I used to be the exact same way.
Creates an enormous amount of volatility in your life. And that core lesson of like, Jamie, reprioritize yourself has been huge. And so like, I always think the best lessons are like the simplest ones and they hit at the core and the values ripple out into so many other areas of my life, our one's life. And that has probably been the biggest one. Reprioritize yourself. Love people, but don't love them above yourself. Don't compromise yourself for others. Be true to yourself. Own yourself. Honor yourself. Love yourself. Let others see that. The right ones will stay. The wrong ones will go. And that's okay.
I think, at least it was definitely true for me, that I wanted people to like me because I didn't like myself very much. And so if I could get the emotional approval or whatever of other people, then I would be able to have my own approval for myself.
Yeah.
But what I realized was like once you stop pleasing people and you just approve yourself for who you are, that people will like you. People like you less when you try to make them like you.
Yeah. I recognize like, I was very lost in younger years. And one of the ways I kind of got a sense of grounding was I outsourced my self-worth to my business. So like people are going to like me because of my business. People are going to respect me because of my business. And that worked until I made a mess of my business. And that like, oh my God, the hole in my life that I felt. And I unfortunately think that at certain parts then I like outsourced my sense of self-worth to relationship. And like really prioritized relationship over and above myself as a result. And then relationship goes and wow, there's like a double grieving period. And so much of like that, so simple and you hear it like really cliche, but like learning to just look in the mirror and one, actually see yourself clearly, and two, actually like appreciate it, love it, prioritize it, care for it, and not compromise it for somebody else. It should be really simple but really big work. and enormously impacting.
How do you value yourself?
How do I value myself? As
Yeah.
in, like, what's the root?
Or how you choose how you want to answer that question, but the question is, how do you value yourself? Again, that goes back to your definition of what value is.
Yeah. It's funny, my head is racing in terms of things, but the big word that's coming up is acceptance.
You value yourself through acceptance?
Um,
Like what is, another way is, how do you value yourself? Like, what is your value?
so I actually feel that there's like a trick in this question.
There's not.
No, but the trick is in it's its simplicity. It's like, you don't question your value. You don't even think about it. There's inherent value. You matter. And I think that this, once you start questioning your value, it takes you on a pretty downward spiral. So actually, it's a knowing. Like, how do you value yourself? It's not even a question. It's you, like, feel your value, embody your value, know your value. But as soon as you bring that up, certain narratives, certain things are going to speak up. Well, Jamie, are you doing that well in the gym? Are you working there? And perhaps actually there's an inner guidance that's coming from that, pointing you in the direction of, like, holes in your own integrity when it comes to your value. And so the proactive approach to that perhaps plugs any holes that might see you devaluing yourself. And the more true you are to that inner voice, that inner guidance, and the more active you are in that journey, I feel that the more evident, the more that sense of value just is.
Value is numerical, right? Like, it's based off of something that has 100% value is completely whole,
Mm-hmm.
or 100% is one. If you have a pie, 100% of the pie is one pie. So that's your value. 100% of Jamie is one Jamie. You came into this world as one Jamie. You can't add anything more to Jamie to make Jamie more than one Jamie, and you can't take anything away from Jamie to be less than one Jamie. So whatever you look at, or however you look at yourself, you are 100% one Jamie. And so your value for yourself is 100%. There's nothing that you need to add to yourself, and there's nothing you could take away from yourself that will increase or decrease your value. Life is a journey of recognizing that you're whole, or at least happiness is a journey of recognizing you're whole. And most of us don't feel what our oneness is, and so we're constantly going through this process of taking away or adding, thinking that by either one of these, subtraction or addition, we're going to somehow become more of ourself, or more whole, or more valued, when at the end of the day, whatever that is, you're always 100%. It's whether or not can you accept that, right? Which you talked about, your acceptance, which was like kind of in there. That's why I was like, I wanted you to get more.
I'm a big believer that, like, your vocabulary is deeply healing, and having the right words, like lines to put together around certain subjects, can either fill you with confidence or leave you with big gaps in your confidence. And having a conversation like that, look, how do you see your value? And actually putting me to a point of struggle. Like, in answering that question, I noticed my toes curled up. I started really fidgeting with my fingers, and it's a whole other thing, answering that face to face. It's a different thing when you're on camera, and you're actually, you're going to share that. It's highly vulnerable, but yeah, you're like hearing your, like, really been put in a point of struggle and dis-ease and stress to answer that kind of question. But there's like, oh, okay, here's where you're at, and then hearing your answer, I can actually find my gaps still in self-worth, which I think are quite revealing and quite interesting. Quite like, oh well, now that I can see that, I can work on that.
Yeah.
But hearing your answer, there's a beautiful. I love that. Like, a pie is a pie. You come into this world whole,
Yeah.
and you go from it. I think think there's probably one of the biggest problems at the moment is that we are incessantly picking at ourselves. We're like,
Yeah.
and like this is just life. You know, you should look away. You should be this smart. You should do this work. You should know this. You should up this. There's so much that you should be that it's so fucking hard.
But
just,
it's about not seeing those things as a bad thing, right? Was it yesterday at the gym when I after getting the tattoo, I had a lot of time of rest and stuff, and I got a little bit fat, and like talking about how you have to hate yourself a little bit. But I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at aspects of yourself that you want to prove and look at those things in disgust. But the way that you look at those things is that's not who you are, right? If you get fat, like you should hate if that's a value thing to you, again, we're using value in a different way.
I am going to screenshot that one and share it.
But if you get fat and that is something like being fit has value to you, that's still not you. It like being more fit is not going to make you more happy, right? But it's going to help you with this idea of growth and progression and moving towards something, right? However we move, as you're still moving as 100% whole as you, but you need to move. Life is movement, death is stillness.
I think isn't it funny how there's all these ideals promoted out there in life, and they're almost promoted as universal ideals. Self-love, love your body. It's like,
I hate my body sometimes.
Some people need that. And then I remember that conversation where you're like, oh, I hate this roll of fat. Like, I hate it so much. And Magda literally turned to you and was like, oh, no, don't hate yourself. And it's like, no, I can change this part of my body. And the way I'm going to motivate that change is I'm going to hate on it. And I will come back in a couple of weeks' time and I will say, I love this look. I think there's something quite interesting that, like, there is a singular dimensional kind of approach to a lot of psychology, a lot of wellness, a lot of ideals. Everybody's looking for, like, what's the 4-step plan, the 3-step plan, or the bullet points that are universal truths. And it's like, yeah, they may be for some person. They may be for the author who shared them, but we're individual. We all have our own different ways of working, some of which may be really controversial to another. Okay, it doesn't work for you, but this actually works for me. Yeah. This is my philosophy. And what I love is that, like, there's certain parts where you can stand up very, very strong and confident and be like, it works for me and I'm doing a bloody good job. So surely I'm doing something right. And there's other aspects of our lives where we unfortunately can't necessarily stand up in that. And that's great to seek advice. But in the physical realm, like, you're extraordinarily inspiring. And so that philosophy, that approach, I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah. I don't hate myself for being short. You know, like, I don't hate myself for being American. Like these things I can't change about myself, but it's just the things that I know I could change that, and I don't hate myself. It's just those, like, I think that comes just from, like, my past of, like, when I was a kid, I was a wrestler, and just kind of like that coaching that I had was very, like, hardcore. I don't know, and it worked for me. And I think my self-esteem is 100% on how I am, how I feel. Like, there's definitely things about me that I want to grow, I want to improve, I want to look a certain way, I want to be able to move a certain way, and then also with my followers or whatever, like, you would think that I have something to prove or whatever with that, but I don't, which is probably why I rarely ever post. When I do post, I just want it to be inspirational.
Oh God. So just when you brought up your followers, I'm remembering back to one of your yoga classes, and there was a line that I've stolen actually since in some of my workshops, but I found it so inspiring, where at the start of most classes, people will say, like, you know, if anybody has an injury, put your hand up, let me be aware of that. And the teachers essentially take responsibility then and there for the care of every individual student. In that moment, I remember at the start of the class, you were like, so if anybody has any injuries, if they're pregnant, if they're mentally unstable, remember to take care of yourself, and please don't put that responsibility on my shoulders. It was so good. It's like some people imprison themselves by thinking that they need to look after others around them, perform in a certain way, and they put an enormous weight on their shoulders. And in that moment, I saw you create great freedom for yourself.
So many yoga teachers listening to this are just cringing now. Can't believe I would say something like that.
So good. I've said it in so many workshops. I'm like, hey, if you can't take responsibility for yourself, if you aren't comfortable in your own nose, please leave. Don't put any responsibility on my shoulders here. You're coming to learn what I have to share. Take it with a pinch of salt. Take the elements you like, disregard the elements that you don't, but do not leave this putting any responsibility or blame on me.
It's not, I don't want people to put responsibility or blame on me. Like as a teacher, I do my best to keep students safe and move them in ways that I know, and I keep my education up to, so I understand the body well enough not to teach something that's harmful. But with I guess you could say it about movement, you could say it about emotions, you could say about it pretty much anything, and you already kind of touched on it. It's like what is good for one person is not good for everybody. There's two types of movement. There's movement that's good for you, and there's movement that's bad for you. That's not the same for everybody, and it's not even always going to be the same for you. Like what movement might be good for you today might be bad for you tomorrow, and vice versa.
Well,
and emotionally, what might be good for you today might be bad for you tomorrow, and vice versa. And what is emotionally positive for you might not always be that way. We need to learn, take responsibility for yourself for most things, and understand, like, know where your edges are.
What comes up for me is that I recognize there's a lot of introductory teachers that I went to, which are great for kind of giving me an introduction. But more recently, what I'm really finding stimulating is people sharing their practices, people sharing their philosophies. I might not wholly agree. Like I couldn't actually work my way through your whole class, but I respected it deeply.
Then I think you could now.
Yes. I can't wait for another class. But I took my breaks. There's certain things I didn't do, and that was okay. But to see you sharing your practice rather than you sharing a practice that would have suited everybody, that's, I think, a challenge that a lot of teachers find themselves in. They're trying to cater to everybody. Our people online, they're trying to please the masses. And it's like, look, that only goes so far. And in actual fact, what I find I learn the most from is the people that are just going deeply on their journey, and they're sharing what works for them, and having the discernment to take everything with a pinch of salt and figure out what's for me in that and what's not for me is helping me progress more as an individual, which I'm loving.
I don't remember where I heard this, but you've heard it before too. Like the attract your tribe or whatever. You know, we're tribal people. And that was the track to your tribe wasn't what I'm talking about, but that's just like the sound bite. But we're tribal people, and in that we biologically want to get along with everybody. We want to fit into a group, and that's one of the most important not characters.
It's an inherent value and safety precaution.
Well, it's one of the most important values to us, or it's not the right word either. Things, for better. It's important for us to fit in.
Yeah.
And there's two different ways to fit in. Or let's say there's three different ways. And I'm saying three different ways for just simplicity, because you could definitely argue more or less or whatever, just depending on how you want to cut the pie. But you could either find a group that everyone shares the same ideals as you, which is why religion is so prominent and successful, why yoga is and stuff. Like, we all think the same way and stuff, so now I could trust you. And so now we get along that way. If you like go back to school with all the different cliques, like you find a clique that's kind of similar to you that you fit into. Well, in that clique, you could, if you're in a group, or let's say you're in more of a limited place where you can't really find your group, right, that shares the same ideas as you, you're generally left with the choice of standing apart from everybody, which is not comfortable and usually not desirable. So people change their inherent values, what they feel is right or wrong, to satisfy the group, to fit in with that group. And then you have the other type of person that this would be the third one, that stays true to exactly who they are, and they make others change their values to fit into you. I definitely started as the one who would change myself to fit into other groups, and I think a lot of people do that, and that's why they're so unhappy with how they are, because they don't feel honest to themselves. They don't they don't feel true to who they are. They have to compromise in a sense, and just to fit in so that they could feel a part of that group. Where I think what brought me a lot of success is at a certain point in time, I made that switch, is where I know who I am. I know how I want to live my life, and I know how I want to move forward with my life. And I'm either going to do that alone or with people following me.
I love that.
And I chose to be uncompromising to my values, who I am. And I don't need anybody to agree with me to be a part of my group or to fit in. I mean, our group, we have a lot of different types of personalities. And I feel like what is special about the group of friends that we really have is almost all of us are leaders. Usually have one leader and a group of followers, right? But we're all leaders that are true to our values, uncompromising to who we are and what we believe, but yet have mutual respect for each other and the differences in ideas. And that's such a hard thing in society, especially with like younger generations. And you look at all like masculinity and stuff and what you need to be masculine, or like all these new ideas. And it seems like there's such a divide on one hand or the other. And it's so far away from what I believe, right? But everyone is just, knowing that so much of this is wrong, completely wrong, but they'd rather be a part of that group rather than being ostracized from it. And this is where especially young men are falling so hard to these horrible ideas, and like why society is taking such a dark turn in so many different ways. I mean, unless those are your ideas and then you feel like it's going exactly how you want to. But
I know I've sometimes like scratched my head if it's looking at the news or just overhearing conversations and be like, how is this actually being believed right now? How is nobody questioning this? And to kind of give your ideas, I found it best to just choose isolation for a good while. Yeah. I found actually I was so confused by what I was reading, what I was hearing, and what was being impressed upon me, that I kind of lost the sense. I was like, who the hell actually am I in all of this? Because none of this is adding up for me. I need space and time to figure myself out. And now more and more I'm following that kind of approach that you'd share, which is like, John, I'm just going to do myself here. And if people want to come along for the ride, great. If people don't, great. But I'm keeping my peace first and foremost, and that kind of priority, that self-love of like, yeah, let's live life on my terms. And perhaps somebody else might like that, might love that. But I don't want to compromise myself. I don't want to put somebody else ahead or anything like that, and find that that I've imprisoned myself. And I find that, like, when you were sharing those examples, I was thinking that a lot of people are imprisoned societally, and that they have to have certain beliefs. They have to present themselves in certain ways. And if they don't, that isolation would be crippling. But in actual fact, generally speaking, and certainly for me, that isolation was the cure.
Yeah. Or if you could just stand up against, this is where my abrasive personality and my over righteous sense of self that I have been a real attribute to who I am. This is I'm not afraid to go upstream against everybody else, because I know what I believe in is what I believe in, right? Also, I know that beliefs can change. There's the movie, Kevin Smith movie, came out a long time ago with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, called Dogma. And Chris Rock is in it, and Chris Rock plays an angel. And the whole thing is about like Catholic dogma and religion and stuff, and it's these two fallen angels find a way back into heaven because of this like kind of loophole or whatever in the dogma of the religion that they could, you know, because they got like kicked out of heaven, how to get back in. And Chris Rock he's saying, he's like, you know, that you have beliefs and ideas, and people will kill each other over their beliefs, because the beliefs, I'm paraphrasing by a lot here, but you know, the beliefs are who you are, right? Ideas can change, right? So it's much better to have ideas than it is to have beliefs.
I actually, you know, when you're sharing that, I'm kind of reminded of you going back to like the symbolism of your tattoos, and like giving yourself a clean slate, and actually not shying away from some of the physical pain that might be involved in that. You know, oftentimes we have our ideas, and it can be quite disruptive to reorientate them, to change. But I think it's so necessary, because those ideas can be like anchors. They can anchor us to the past, and they cut us away from being whole and total in the present. And I feel it's a really important process to be true and honest with yourself in terms of, oh yeah, it's a new day. And in actual fact, in this day, I may have said that yesterday, but circumstances are a little bit different. And when you talked about some of the mixed messaging around masculinity, for me, one of the big things was, Jamie, be consistent. And that consistency, of course, it has its merits in some areas of life. But the idea to believe one thing one moment and then to evolve, it can be seen as unacceptable. In actual fact, for me, it was like progressive. It's like I'm learning, so of course I'm growing.
Also, are the beliefs, are they even your own? An interesting thing, who said this? This is not me. Someone else said this, and I can't remember who said it. But I'm sorry, I should give this person credit, because it's really a smart thought. But if you have a belief and there's nothing that I could say or any fact or evidence or anything to change that belief, then that belief is not yours. If there's nothing that I could say that could change what you believe, then that's not your belief.
It's just been imprinted into you.
You just adopted it from someone else because you didn't come there through reason or
and
ration.
It's so solidified, and it's so anchored into your idea of who you are. Whereas if you could be convinced otherwise, it's in a processed, experienced belief. And so it's open to change and influence.
And I could say 100% that there's not a single thing I believe in that I am not opposed to changing based on some better evidence or fact or whatever. I'm an atheist. But if Jesus came down tomorrow and I was like, oh, there's Jesus, I would no longer be an atheist, obvious, right? But you couldn't, nothing against Christians. I think belief is a necessary part for a lot of people to survive this world, this human experience, and a lot of people need that. I don't. I did, but I would much rather believe in God than not God.
Yeah. But
there's nothing that most people that believe in God, there's nothing that you could do that would ever disprove their belief. It's just an interesting thought. Like, obviously I'm on the pro-atheism atheism side, but ask yourself, is there anything that could change your mind about what you believe? Yeah. And it's not your belief.
I've actually loved my journey over the last number of years. It's been highly disruptive. Like I feel like I have lived hundreds of different lives, deep diving into all areas of life. And like what I found is like I learn one thing in one area and it starts to ripple out changes in all others. God bless my kind of family and lifelong friends, because every time I come back to them, they must, at certain points, must have been like, who the hell are you now? I definitely feel there's a groundedness that's coming in.
Oh, I love watching it. I love you like telling me about your experiences and what you're up to and what you're doing next and stuff. And I'm so happy that you're out exploring all these different avenues, and very different than anything I've ever done or experienced and stuff. And it's amazing that we have this opportunity to really choose the life. I mean, obviously there's a lot of privilege in that, and not everybody has that opportunity, but you and I are both lucky enough to be able to choose that experience.
Can I just share that even you sharing that with me there is really powerful? So a lot of the times I felt like, to go out into the world, to explore, to experiment, it was unacceptable. And to some it was. And to some it was met by fear, and some it was met by rejection. But there was always a thing that I was like, I want to hold dear those that can celebrate that can love that. And to hear it literally shared, like you looked at me in the eyes and that, and you said, here, I love that about you. That's so nice. That actually inspires me to be all the more me. And what I recognize, unfortunately, in some of the relationships that I found myself distanced from more recently is like, do you know what? I don't want to suppress myself.
And shouldn't.
At any value, I don't want to. I want to make sure I'm surrounded by people that actually love me and love those traits. And that's something that I feel really lucky to have you in my life in that regard. So thank you.
I'm lucky to have you in my life.
Dude, I would love you and leave you. There's a funny point at the end of the podcast where I'm like, if somebody likes this, if somebody wants to connect with you, and I'm like, how do they contact you? But you're the simplest of Google searches away at Dylan Werner, and you will just pop up on social media, on websites, on everything. So
yeah. Practice with me online. Do yoga with me. DylanWernerYoga.com.
Absolutely. I'm going to put a test out to anyone. Like, I'd actually really, really invite you to do a class with Dylan as a barometer of where you're at.
I do have all levels. Level 1, level 2, by all levels a challenge.
Yeah, and Dylan will say all levels, but he is so developed in his practice that what he sees as all levels is still
I
extraordinary.
really try to make level 1 accessible. Still challenging, but accessible for anybody that's never done anything before and just starting out. I really do. And then I also try to make level 3. I think whenever you go out and do anything, if you can do everything, it's not the thing for you, because there needs to be stuff that you can't do for there to be room to grow. And so if you ever show up in a fitness class or whatever it is, you're going to that and you can do everything that's there, it's not for you. You need to find the place where you're challenged, where there's actually space and opportunity to grow. So that's from what I stand from, and that's how I like to teach. Like, whenever I teach a class, I want my students to be able to do like 70, at least 50% of it, but probably more like 70%. And there always be that like 30% of growth of the things that they can't do or struggle with, because that's why we show up every day is to grow. That's the secret of life.
I love the way you just, when you said that's why we show up every day, I found when I did your class once, I don't think I returned for like 6 months. And then I came back again. And I do genuinely mean it. If you do have a practice, I certainly came over here feeling like I was strong and I was grounded. And it was really humbling, but at the same time, really inspiring. And as I say this, it's time for me to do one of those classes again too.
Yeah.
So dude, thank you so much. Thank you very, very much for sharing your time.
I'm glad we've done this before. We have some other conversations to pass, and every time, except for one, has been really good. We did have one conversation that was just like off the walls. That it was a weird day for, I think, especially for me, but maybe for both of us. But
yeah, I just remember, because we did our first podcast together, which you can listen back to. And then like a few years later, we were like both agreed like, wow, a lot of life has changed and evolved. Let's check in again. And about 40 or 50 minutes later, we were like, we can never, ever share this.
Yeah.
Let's just delete this immediately. And so it's actually so nice to get through this and share. And that's it, dude. Thank you.
Because how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Boom. But 1 second, how does that even make sense coming together there now?
It doesn't. Yeah, but that's okay, because not everything has to make sense.
That was like a South Park ending.
Yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He has a book called Astrophysics for like dummies or something, or for I'm messing this up too.
Is that where you got your physics references from?
No. Astrophysics is different than physics, but he starts it out. He says that the universe is under no obligation to make sense to you. And we have this idea in life that everything should make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, we fill in that holes with whatever to make it make sense. But it's okay if it doesn't make sense. Not everything is supposed to. And it's our own hubris, our own intellectual hubris, that makes us think that we can understand everything that's going on. But it's okay not to know.
Boom.
Boom. I love you, man.
Love you.